I moved into my new house with excitement and anticipation. It was an old Victorian-style home, nestled in a quiet, picturesque neighborhood. The real estate agent had assured me that it was a steal, and I couldn't resist the charm of its historical architecture. The first few weeks were uneventful. I spent my days unpacking boxes and arranging furniture, enjoying the process of making the house my own. However, as the days turned into weeks, strange things began to happen. One evening I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard the faint sound of music. I followed the melody, which led me to the basement. The basement was dimly lit, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and dusty old furniture covered with white sheets. It was eerily quiet down there, except for the distant music. I descended the creaky wooden stairs and followed the sound of the music, which seemed to be coming from an old phonograph. The room was filled with vintage records, and the phonograph itself was spinning one of them. I was alone in the house, and I couldn't understand how the music had started playing on its own. I turned off the phonograph and hurried back upstairs, feeling a shiver run down my spine. The strange occurrences continued. Footsteps echoed through the hallways at night, even though I was sure I was the only one in the house. Objects inexplicably moved from one place to another. I began to feel like an uninvited guest in my own home, with an unseen presence watching my every move. One evening, while I was reading in the living room, I saw a shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye. It moved quickly and disappeared into a dark hallway. I jumped up and searched the house, but there was no one there. I began to doubt my sanity and wondered if I was experiencing the effects of stress from the move. I decided to do some research on the history of the house. The records showed that it had been built in the late 1800s and had changed ownership several times over the years. The most intriguing detail I discovered was that a family had lived in the house during the 1920s. They had a daughter named Emily who was known to be musically gifted and had a love for playing the piano. The more I delved into the history, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I had encountered Emily's music in the basement, and the shadowy figure I saw might have been her. I decided to investigate further and try to communicate with the spirit that seemed to inhabit my home. I bought an old Ouija board from a local antique store and set it up in the living room. I lit some candles and sat down, my fingers lightly resting on the planchette. I began to ask questions, hoping to make contact with Emily's spirit. The planchette started to move, spelling out words. It felt like I was having a conversation with Emily. She revealed that she had lived in the house during her youth and had loved to play the piano in the living room. She missed her family and the music that had filled the house during her time. I decided to buy a vintage piano and place it in the living room as a tribute to Emily. I started taking piano lessons and even played some of her favorite pieces. As I did, the strange occurrences in the house began to lessen, and I felt a sense of peace settling in. Emily's presence became more of a comforting one, and I no longer felt like an intruder in my own home. It seemed that by acknowledging her and her love for music, I had brought her some solace and closure. Months passed, and I continued to live in the house with Emily's spirit. We coexisted peacefully, and I even felt like I had a guardian watching over me. It was a unique and somewhat eerie experience, but I had come to accept it as a part of my life. As time went on, I grew to appreciate the history and the unique connection I had with Emily. I never felt alone in that house, and the sound of her music, once haunting, became a comforting lullaby. My new house had turned from a place of fear to a place of shared existence, with a friendly spirit from the past. Story 2. Moving into our new house was supposed to be the start of a fresh chapter in our lives, but it quickly became a nightmare that none of us could have ever imagined. The house was a grand old mansion, nestled at the edge of a small, seemingly idyllic town. My wife Lisa and I had fallen in love with its Victorian charm, and our 2 young children, Emily and Ethan, were excited about their new home. It was a sprawling, multi-story structure with intricate woodwork, stained glass windows, and a towering oak tree in the backyard. It was the kind of place you'd see in movies, and we were convinced we had found our dream home. The trouble began shortly after we moved in. At first, it was subtle, easy to dismiss as mere quirks of an old house. Footsteps echoed through the hallways at night, and we would occasionally hear whispers when no one else was around. Emily complained about her toys moving on their own, but we chalked it up to her active imagination. One evening, Lisa and I were in the kitchen when we heard it, the faint, eerie sound of a child's laughter. We exchanged a puzzled glance and rushed to check on our children. They were both sound asleep in their rooms, and the laughter continued, growing louder, echoing through the empty hallways. We searched the entire house, but there was no source for the unsettling giggles. The disturbances escalated from there. Objects would inexplicably fall off shelves and shatter on the floor. Our once happy children began to have terrible nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, screaming about a little girl who wanted to play with them. We were on edge, living in a constant state of unease, and our dream home had become a waking nightmare. One day, I decided to do some research on the house's history. It was then that I discovered a name, Lily Morgan. She had lived in the house in the early 1900s, and her family had left town under mysterious circumstances. Local legends hinted at tragedy, but no one knew the full story. Desperate to put an end to our torment, I reached out to a local historian who had a passion for uncovering the town's dark secrets. She shared what she had found about the Morgan family. Lily was their only child, and she had gone missing at the age of 7. The Morgans had searched for her for years, but they were never able to find any trace of their beloved daughter. The day after my conversation with the historian, I decided to visit Lily's grave, which was located in the town's cemetery. The headstone revealed that she had disappeared on July 13, 1915. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily's spirit was trying to communicate with us, especially our children. That night, I sat down with a notepad and pen in hand, hoping to make contact with Lily. I lit a few candles, closed my eyes, and focused on reaching out to her. As I began to write, I felt a presence in the room, a cold breeze that sent shivers down my spine. The words on the notepad began to form, and I realized that Lily was trying to communicate with me through automatic writing. Her message was clear. She was lonely, trapped in a world of darkness and longing for someone to play with. My heart ached for her, and I made a promise to help her find peace. Over the next few weeks, we did our best to connect with Lily. We placed toys and games in the playroom, hoping to make her feel welcome. The laughter in the house became less haunting, and we could almost feel the presence of a playful child. But as we learned more about Lily's story, the terrifying truth of her disappearance began to unravel. It turned out that the Morgan family had kept a dark secret. Lily had a twin sister named Daisy, who had died at birth. The Morgans, unable to cope with their grief, had convinced Lily that Daisy was still alive, and they locked her in the basement, away from the world. Determined to free Lily from her torment, we ventured into the basement, which had always given us an unsettling feeling. In the dim light, we discovered a hidden door that led to a small, secret chamber. It was a tiny, windowless room with faded, childlike drawings on the walls. The realization hit us like a sledgehammer. Lily had been locked in this chamber for years, living in darkness, cut off from the outside world. Her laughter had turned into a haunting cry for help. We spent hours in that basement, talking to Lily, comforting her, and promising to set her free. It was an emotional and gut-wrenching experience. With the historian's help, we contacted the authorities and revealed the horrifying truth about the Morgans. Lily's story made headlines, and the town was gripped by the shocking revelation. The Morgans' house was investigated, and they were arrested for their crimes. Lily's spirit, it seemed, had chosen us to be her saviors. With the Morgans in custody, we were finally able to set Lily free. It was as if a weight had been lifted from our home. The laughter turned joyful, and the disturbances ceased. Our children slept peacefully through the night, free from the nightmares that had plagued them. We continued to live in the old mansion, but this time it was filled with laughter and love. Lily's spirit had found the peace it had been searching for, and our family had found a sense of closure. Our new house was no longer a source of horror, but a place of healing and redemption, a testament to the enduring power of love and compassion. Story 3. I can still remember the excitement that coursed through my veins as I locked the door to our new house. It was a beautiful old farmhouse, nestled at the edge of a quaint, picturesque village. The real estate agent had described it as a hidden gem, and we couldn't wait to start this new chapter in our lives. The house itself was a character from a bygone era, with its white picket fence, wraparound porch, and a barn that had seen better days. The interior had its share of quirks too, like the creaky wooden floors and the vintage clawfoot bathtub. We fell in love with the charm, despite its age. The first few days were filled with unpacking and making the house our own. My husband, Mark, and I worked tirelessly to restore its former glory. Our children, Lily and Ethan, were thrilled with their new bedrooms and the vast backyard, complete with a tree swing. But it wasn't long before we realized that something was off. The strange occurrences began subtly, almost imperceptibly. The faucets would drip in the middle of the night, even though we had fixed them. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, only to disappear when we turned our heads. At first, we dismissed these incidents as our minds playing tricks on us or the house's quirks. One evening, as I was putting Lily and Ethan to bed, Lily whispered to me, "Mom, who's the lady in the mirror?" Confused, I asked her what she meant. She pointed to an antique mirror that we had brought into her room. In the reflection, I saw a faint, translucent figure, a woman in a white dress. My heart raced as I turned to the mirror, but the figure was gone. I tucked Lily and Ethan in, reassuring them that it was just their imagination. Mark and I couldn't ignore the escalating strangeness any longer. We started hearing whispers in the dead of night, unintelligible but undeniably eerie. Objects would be moved from their places when no one had touched them. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy, and we all felt like we were constantly being watched. One afternoon, as I was in the garden, I struck up a conversation with our next-door neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Miller. She had lived in the village for decades and seemed to know everyone's business. She paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on the farmhouse. "You know, that house has a history," she said, her voice filled with an eerie calmness. I leaned in, eager for information. "What kind of history?" Mrs. Miller's eyes held a glint of something I couldn't quite place. "Well, the previous owners left suddenly, you see. They claimed they couldn't take it anymore, the things they heard and saw." My heart sank as I realized that Mrs. Miller was alluding to the strange happenings in our own home. "What kind of things?" I asked cautiously. She hesitated before continuing. "Voices in the walls, apparitions in the mirrors, and the sensation of being followed. They called it the Whispering House." As the days turned into weeks, our family was consumed by fear. Ethan refused to sleep alone, and Lily grew increasingly withdrawn. Mark and I spent sleepless nights discussing whether we should leave, but we had invested so much in the house, both emotionally and financially, that it seemed impossible to walk away. One evening, as I was tucking Lily into bed, she broke down in tears. "Mom, it's her. She talks to me at night. She wants something." My heart ached for my daughter. I held her tight and asked, "Who, sweetheart, who talks to you?" Lily's voice trembled as she whispered, "The lady in the mirror. She says she needs our help." That night, I decided to confront the entity. Armed with a vintage Ouija board that I had found in the attic, I set it up in the living room. Candles flickered as I placed my fingers on the planchette. The room grew colder, and the air felt thick with anticipation. "Are you the one haunting this house?" I asked, my voice trembling. The planchette moved, spelling out words. It was a message from the spirit, confirming that it was the one causing the disturbances. It claimed to be a woman who had once lived in the house and had met an unfortunate fate. The spirit's messages were fragmented and filled with sorrow. It told us that it needed our help to find peace and reveal the truth about its death. It asked us to investigate the barn, which it claimed held the key to unraveling the mystery. With trepidation, we ventured into the dilapidated barn, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. As we searched the structure, we came across an old hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside, we found a small wooden box containing faded letters and photographs. The letters told a tragic story. The woman's name was Abigail, and she had lived in the farmhouse in the early 1900s. The photographs revealed a family and a husband who had committed unspeakable acts of cruelty. Abigail had been trapped, isolated, and subjected to torment until her life was cut short. It became clear that Abigail's spirit had been seeking justice and a voice to reveal the horrors she had endured. With the newfound evidence, we contacted the local authorities, who reopened the investigation into Abigail's death. As the truth came to light, Abigail's spirit began to find peace. The haunting occurrences in our home gradually ceased, and the heavy atmosphere lifted. We had helped her find the closure she had longed for, and our new house, once a place of terror, began to feel like a true home. Our family continued to live in the old farmhouse, grateful for the peace we had brought to Abigail and the lessons we had learned about the enduring power of compassion and truth. Our new house was no longer a place of horror, but a symbol of healing and redemption, a testament to the importance of uncovering the past's dark secrets and bringing justice to those who had suffered. Story 4. The day we moved into our new house, I had a feeling of unease. It was a spacious 2-story home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. The real estate agent had described it as a bargain, but something about it didn't sit right with me. The first night was unsettling. The house seemed to have a strange energy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I lay in bed, I heard whispers, faint and indistinct, coming from somewhere within the house. I assumed it was just my imagination playing tricks on me in the unfamiliar environment. In the days that followed, my unease grew. I started noticing odd occurrences, like doors that would creak open on their own, even though I was sure I had closed them securely. Items would disappear and reappear in different rooms, and strange shadows moved across the walls, making me question my own sanity. My husband David reassured me that it was all in my head, but our 2 young children, Sarah and Ben, seemed equally unsettled. They would talk about an invisible friend they called the Whisperer. According to them, the Whisperer would tell them secrets in the dead of night, secrets that filled their dreams with nightmares. One evening, as I was tucking Sarah into bed, she asked me, "Mom, can the Whisperer leave the house?" Puzzled, I replied, "I don't know, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" Sarah's eyes glistened with fear. "Because he told me he wants to play outside." My heart sank. This was the first time I had heard Sarah mention the Whisperer's desire to leave the house. I tried to dismiss it as a child's overactive imagination, but I couldn't help feeling a growing sense of dread. One stormy night, as heavy rain battered the windows, I decided to investigate the strange occurrences. I spent hours scouring the house, searching for any rational explanation. In the attic, I came across a dusty box of old books, journals, and photographs. Among them was a diary from the early 1900s, belonging to a woman named Amelia. Amelia's diary entries were filled with tales of woe and tragedy. She spoke of a husband who had become obsessed with a mysterious presence in the house, a presence that he believed would grant him immense power if appeased. Amelia described her husband's descent into madness and the chilling rituals he performed to summon this entity. The diary also revealed that Amelia had tried to protect her children from her husband's madness. She spoke of hiding them away in the attic, far from the horrors that had consumed her husband's soul. My heart pounded as I read these words. It seemed that the Whisperer, as Sarah and Ben had named it, might be connected to Amelia's husband's dark pursuits. The diary mentioned a specific ritual chamber hidden beneath the house, a place where the husband believed he could bridge the gap between the living and the otherworldly. Fueled by a mixture of fear and determination, I decided to explore the basement, convinced it held the answers I sought. The basement was dimly lit, with cold, damp air clinging to the walls. As I descended the creaky stairs, I felt a growing sense of dread. In a corner of the basement, I discovered an inconspicuous trapdoor concealed beneath an old rug. It was the entrance to the ritual chamber Amelia had mentioned in her diary. Trembling, I mustered the courage to open it, revealing a small, windowless room. The walls were adorned with strange symbols and cryptic writings, and a flickering candle sat in the center. I began to piece together the grim reality of the house's history. Amelia's husband had conducted rituals in this chamber, believing he could summon a powerful entity. However, these rituals had opened a gateway to something far darker and more malevolent than he could have ever imagined. I had to act quickly to protect my family. I reached out to a local historian who helped me research the history of the house. We discovered that Amelia's husband had met a grisly end, and his dark pursuits had left an indelible mark on the house. The historian advised me to seek out a paranormal investigator, someone with experience in dealing with malevolent entities. Together, we conducted a series of rituals to cleanse the house, invoking the names of benevolent spirits to counteract the darkness that had been unleashed. The process was grueling, but over time the atmosphere in the house began to change. The eerie occurrences lessened, and the children's nightmares subsided. It was as if the malevolent entity had been weakened by our efforts. With the investigators' guidance, we sealed the ritual chamber, ensuring that no one could ever access it again. The malevolent presence that had plagued our new house began to fade, and a sense of peace settled over our home. Our family continued to live in the house, but we could never truly escape the knowledge of its dark history. The whispers and shadows were gone, replaced by a sense of security and calm. Our new house was no longer a place of horror, but a symbol of resilience and the enduring strength of family. We had faced the darkest of entities and emerged from the ordeal, united and stronger than ever. Story 5. The day we moved into our new house was one of anticipation and joy. It was a charming cottage nestled in a peaceful, wooded area, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The moment we set foot inside, I was struck by a sense of warmth and tranquility that seemed to emanate from every corner of the house. Little did I know that the serenity was only a facade, masking the horrors that awaited us. The first few weeks in our new home were idyllic. My wife, Emily, and I spent our days exploring the surrounding forest, with our 2 children, Olivia and Jack. The house, with its quaint features and rustic charm, felt like the perfect refuge from the stresses of urban life. We thought we had found our slice of paradise. However, as the days turned into weeks, a feeling of unease began to creep in. It started with subtle, inexplicable occurrences. Small items would go missing, only to reappear in strange places. The lights would flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I dismissed these events as mere quirks of an old house, but I could sense Emily's growing unease. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, Emily's face turned pale as she stared at the kitchen window. Her trembling hand pointed towards the glass, where an ethereal figure stood on the other side. It was a woman, her eyes hollow and her hair disheveled. She looked like a specter from another realm. Before we could react, the figure faded into the darkness. We rushed outside, searching the yard, but there was no one to be found. We tried to rationalize it, blaming it on our tired minds or tricks of the light. Still, a chill had settled over our family, and the feeling of being watched never truly left us. One night I was woken by a soft, melodic humming. I followed the sound to the attic, where I found Olivia standing alone, her eyes glazed over. She was humming a haunting tune, one I had never heard before. I shook her gently, and she snapped out of her trance, looking at me with confusion. "Mommy was singing," she said, her voice trembling. She wanted me to sing with her. Emily had been fast asleep in our bedroom, and I knew it couldn't have been her. The humming continued for a few more seconds before it faded away, leaving the attic in silence. We were now sure that something was amiss in our new house, something beyond the realm of our understanding. I decided to investigate the history of the cottage, hoping to find answers to the strange occurrences. Our neighbor, Mrs. Hudson, had lived in the area for decades and was a wealth of local knowledge. She revealed that the cottage had a dark past. It had once been the home of a woman named Eleanor, who was rumored to be a recluse. Eleanor's husband had mysteriously disappeared, leaving her to live alone in the cottage. As I delved deeper into the history, I discovered that Eleanor had been an accomplished pianist, known for her hauntingly beautiful compositions. However, her music had taken a sinister turn after her husband's disappearance. It was said that she had become obsessed with communicating with the dead through her music. The more I learned about Eleanor's life, the more I felt that she might be the source of the eerie occurrences in our house. It was as if her spirit lingered, seeking to complete her unfinished work. One evening, as I was alone in the house, I heard the faint strains of a piano coming from the attic. I followed the music, ascending the narrow staircase, and was led to a room that was filled with dusty old sheet music and a grand piano. The keys played on their own, creating an eerie melody that filled the room. I approached the piano, trembling, and saw the name Eleanor scrawled on a sheet of music. It was then that I realized I needed to confront the entity that seemed to be trapped in our house. With the help of a local paranormal investigator, we conducted a séance, hoping to make contact with Eleanor's spirit. The séance was a chilling experience. We lit candles, joined hands, and called out to Eleanor, asking her to communicate with us. The room grew cold, and we felt a presence, an otherworldly force. The planchette on the Ouija board began to move on its own, spelling out messages. Eleanor's spirit told us that she had been searching for her husband, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. She had believed that her music could bridge the gap between the living and the dead, and she had composed a haunting requiem to call him back. She revealed that her husband's spirit had been trapped in the house, unable to move on. We understood that her presence was not malevolent, but driven by love and desperation. She longed to reunite with her husband, who had been lost to her in life and death. Over time, we helped Eleanor find her husband's spirit and assisted them in their reunion. The eerie occurrences in the house lessened, and we felt a sense of peace settle in. The haunted music that had once tormented us turned into a melancholic, bittersweet melody that we could almost hear in the background, a testament to Eleanor's enduring love. Our new house was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to the enduring power of love and the mysteries of the afterlife. We learned that sometimes the past lingers, seeking closure and connection, and we were fortunate to have been a part of Eleanor's journey to find peace. Story 6. It was a chilly, overcast day when we pulled up to our new house. The real estate agent had promised us that this was a fixer-upper with great potential, and we were excited to make it our own. The old Victorian-style mansion stood with an air of grandeur, despite its peeling paint and boarded-up windows. We couldn't wait to get to work and transform it into our dream home, but little did we know the horrors that awaited us within those weathered walls. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of do-it-yourself projects and the sound of hammers echoing through the house. We were determined to breathe new life into the old mansion, and with every brushstroke of paint, it started to feel like home. But there was something off, a presence that seemed to linger in the corners of our vision, a feeling of being watched that never quite left us. The strange occurrences began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Objects would vanish, only to reappear in odd places. We heard footsteps in the middle of the night, echoing through the hallways when we were certain we were the only ones home. The air turned icy in certain rooms, and whispers seemed to drift from the walls. We tried to rationalize these events, attributing them to the creaks and groans of an old house. One night, as we were settling into our new bedroom, I saw a shadowy figure in the corner of the room. It was hunched and indistinct, but its presence sent shivers down my spine. I turned on the lights, but the figure was gone. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that it was just a trick of the light. As the weeks passed, the disturbances grew more unsettling. My husband, John, claimed he heard a woman sobbing in the middle of the night, but every time he searched the house, he found nothing. Our children, Lily and Ethan, began having nightmares, waking up in terror and complaining about a scary lady in the house. We decided to do some research on the house's history, thinking that perhaps it held clues to the strange occurrences. It was then that we uncovered the chilling truth. The mansion had a dark and tragic past. In the late 1800s, the house had been the residence of the prominent Harrison family. The patriarch, Thomas Harrison, was a wealthy businessman known for his cruelty. The story that sent chills down our spines was that of his wife, Margaret. She had suffered years of abuse at the hands of her husband, but she had disappeared mysteriously, leaving no trace behind. As I delved further into the history, I discovered old newspaper clippings that hinted at Margaret's ghost haunting the mansion. The local legend was that she had never truly left, and her spirit was said to seek revenge against the Harrisons. We now realized that the shadowy figure I had seen and the woman's sobs John had heard were likely manifestations of Margaret's tortured spirit. It was clear that we were living in a haunted house, and the realization filled us with dread. But we couldn't bear the thought of leaving after all the work we had put into the mansion. We decided to stay and coexist with Margaret's spirit, hoping that we could find a way to bring her peace. One night, as we were discussing our options in the living room, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The temperature dropped, and an eerie silence enveloped us. The room felt heavy, and it was as though Margaret was making her presence known. I decided to try to communicate with her. I lit a few candles and placed them in the center of the room, forming a circle. I reached out to Margaret, telling her that we were aware of her pain and suffering, and that we wanted to help her find peace. As I spoke, the flames of the candles flickered and danced, and I felt a presence in the room. It was as if Margaret was listening. I asked her to give us a sign, and that's when we heard the faint sound of a music box playing from a nearby shelf. The tune was hauntingly beautiful, and it sent shivers down our spines. The music box had been a family heirloom, and it had been tucked away in a dusty corner. It was a piece that had once belonged to Margaret. It seemed as though she was trying to communicate with us through this music box. We decided to leave the music box out in the open, and every so often we would hear it play its melancholic tune. It was as if Margaret was reaching out, reminding us of her presence. As time went on, the unsettling disturbances in the house lessened. We never felt truly alone, but we coexisted with Margaret's spirit in an uneasy peace. We couldn't bring ourselves to leave the mansion, and Margaret's story had become a part of our own. Our new house had become a place of history, where the past and present intertwined. Margaret's spirit had found a way to communicate and make her presence known, and we had chosen to acknowledge and remember her. It was a unique and haunting experience, one that had brought a new dimension to our home. Our new house was no longer a place of fear, but a place of understanding and coexistence with a tortured soul from the past. Story 7. The day we moved into our new house was a day filled with hope and excitement. It was a beautiful two-story colonial-style home, nestled at the edge of a quiet, wooded area. The previous owners had left in a hurry, which explained the too-good-to-be-true price, but we didn't think much of it at the time. Little did we know the horrors that awaited us within those walls. The first few days in our new home were uneventful. My wife, Emily, and I were busy unpacking, and our two children, Lily and Ethan, were eager to explore their new surroundings. The house had an old-world charm with creaky wooden floors, antique fixtures, and a sense of history that drew us in. It was a fixer-upper, but we were determined to make it our own. As the days turned into weeks, strange occurrences began to unfold. It started with the subtlest of disturbances, a whisper in the night, a faint rustling in the attic. We brushed them off as the house's quirks, the echoes of its history. But the whispers grew louder and the rustling became more pronounced. One evening, as I was putting Ethan to bed, he looked at me with wide, fearful eyes and said, "Daddy, there's someone in the closet." I opened the closet door, revealing an empty space, but Ethan insisted that he had seen a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. I comforted him and assured him it was just his imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in that house. The disturbances continued. Objects would vanish and reappear in different rooms. Emily would hear disembodied voices calling her name, and I would wake up to the sensation of being watched. The air in certain rooms grew cold, and the atmosphere was heavy with an unexplained presence. One night, as Emily and I were in the living room, we heard the sound of children's laughter echoing from upstairs. We exchanged puzzled glances. Our children were fast asleep in their rooms. We crept upstairs, the laughter growing louder, and it led us to the attic. The attic was dark and filled with old, forgotten items. The laughter seemed to be coming from a dusty, forgotten corner. We pulled away some boxes, revealing a vintage music box. It was ornate and charming, but the laughter was unmistakably emanating from it. We hesitated, and then Emily wound up the music box. A haunting tune filled the attic, and as the melody played, the laughter grew louder, echoing through the room. We realized that this was not a child's laughter, but something more sinister, something that sent shivers down our spines. We couldn't bear the idea of something malevolent lurking in our home, so we decided to do some research on the house's history. It was then that we stumbled upon a name, Mary Sullivan. Mary had lived in the house in the early 1900s, and her story was shrouded in tragedy. Mary was a widow with two young children, a daughter and a son. The family had lived in the house for years until a terrible accident took the lives of Mary's children. The children had been playing in the attic when a faulty floorboard gave way, causing them to fall to their deaths. Mary had been devastated by the loss of her children and, according to the town's records, had died in the house of a broken heart soon after. It was believed that her spirit had never left, forever bound to the house where her children had met their tragic end. The realization hit us like a sledgehammer. The laughter we had heard in the attic was not the innocent laughter of children, but the anguished cries of a mother who had lost her offspring. We had unwittingly wound up the music box that had belonged to Mary's children, opening a portal to the past and inviting Mary's tormented spirit into our home. Determined to put Mary's spirit to rest, we decided to reach out to a local medium who specialized in helping spirits find peace. She arrived with a sense of calm and confidence, ready to communicate with Mary. As we gathered in the attic, the medium began to speak, addressing Mary's spirit directly. The room grew cold, and the air was thick with anticipation. The medium's words were gentle and soothing, promising Mary that her children were at peace, that it was time for her to let go. A chill passed through the room, and the music box began to play its eerie tune once more. It was as if Mary was responding to the medium's words. The atmosphere grew heavier, and then, as if carried away by a gentle breeze, Mary's spirit seemed to dissipate, leaving the attic in silence. We never heard the laughter again. The strange occurrences ceased, and we felt a sense of peace wash over our home. Mary's spirit had found the closure it had been seeking for decades, and our new house was no longer haunted by her presence. Our family continued to live in the house, grateful for the peace we had brought to Mary, and the lessons we had learned about the enduring power of love and letting go. Our new house was no longer a place of fear, but a symbol of healing and redemption, a testament to the importance of helping those who had been trapped in the past find their way to a brighter future. Story 8. It was a sunny spring day when we pulled into the driveway of our new house. The excitement was palpable as we stepped out of the car and gazed at our new home. The house, a 2-story colonial, was nestled in a serene, tree-lined neighborhood, and it exuded an old-world charm that had drawn us in. As we walked through the front door, the real estate agent smiled and assured us that we were making a wise investment. It was a fixer-upper, but the price had been too good to pass up. We could see the potential in the grand old house, with its high ceilings, vintage hardwood floors, and elegant wainscoting. It was going to be our dream home, or so we thought. The first few days in our new house were filled with the excitement of making it our own. My wife, Sarah, and I had been planning this move for years, and we had big dreams for the place. Our 2 children, Lily and Ethan, explored the nooks and crannies of the house, claiming their bedrooms and discovering the hidden treasures of a bygone era. But it didn't take long for us to notice something peculiar. Odd occurrences began to happen. Lights flickered inexplicably, and faucets turned on and off by themselves. We dismissed these as electrical and plumbing issues, but as the days passed, the disturbances grew more unsettling. One evening, as I was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at me with wide, fearful eyes. "Daddy, there's a man in my closet," she whispered, her voice trembling. I opened the closet door to find it empty, but Lily insisted that she had seen a tall, shadowy figure lurking inside. I assured her it was just a figment of her imagination, but a chill ran down my spine. The strange occurrences escalated. We would hear whispered conversations in empty rooms, as if people were huddled together in secret. Sarah began having vivid, disturbing dreams, night after night, where she claimed to have seen a woman in white, her eyes hollow and her face twisted with anguish. One afternoon, as I was exploring the attic, I stumbled upon a dusty old journal tucked away in a corner. The journal belonged to a man named Thomas, who had lived in the house in the early 1900s. As I leafed through its pages, I discovered the tragic story of a family that had once called our house home. Thomas had been a loving father to his daughter, Elizabeth, and his wife, Sarah. They had been a happy family until tragedy struck. Elizabeth had fallen ill, and despite his best efforts, Thomas couldn't save her. She had passed away in the very house that we now called home. As I read further, I realized that the journal entries had grown darker. Thomas wrote about hearing his daughter's laughter in the middle of the night, even after her death. He described his wife's descent into madness, claiming that she had been speaking to their deceased daughter. The last entry was the most haunting. Thomas wrote about his wife's strange behavior, her obsession with communicating with their lost daughter. He mentioned a room in the basement, hidden away from prying eyes, where his wife conducted strange, otherworldly rituals. The journal described a woman who was tormented by grief and guilt, and it left me with a sinking feeling. It seemed as if the troubled spirits of the past had not found peace and were still tied to the house. Determined to uncover the truth, I descended into the basement to find the room described in the journal. The basement was damp and dimly lit, and it sent shivers down my spine. As I ventured deeper, I stumbled upon a hidden room, concealed behind a wall of bricks. The room was a chilling sight. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols and strange markings. In the center of the room, there was a small wooden chair and a weathered old doll, the kind that would have belonged to a child from a century past. As I investigated further, I discovered old photographs and personal items belonging to the family. It was as if the room had been a shrine to the memory of the deceased daughter. It was clear that this had been the place where Sarah, the wife, had attempted to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. The room was a conduit, a place where the troubled spirits of the past were able to interact with the living. It was this room that had been the source of the eerie disturbances in our new house, Realizing the gravity of the situation, I contacted a local paranormal investigator. With their help, we conducted a series of rituals to communicate with the spirits and to assist them in finding peace. We used seances and Ouija boards to reach out to the tormented souls and provide them with a path to the afterlife. As we made contact with the spirits, it became clear that they were trapped in a cycle of grief and despair. They longed for closure, for resolution of the guilt and sorrow that had consumed them. It was our mission to help them find that closure. The process was intense and harrowing, and it felt as if time itself had blurred as we reached across the divide between the living and the dead. Slowly but surely, we felt the presence of the spirits dissipate, leaving a sense of tranquility in the house. Our new house was no longer haunted by the tormented souls of the past. It had become a place of healing and redemption, where the troubled spirits had found peace and resolution. We, too, had found closure in helping them on their journey to the afterlife. Our family continued to live in the house, grateful for the experience and the understanding that not all hauntings were malevolent. Our new house was a place of history and compassion, a testament to the enduring connection between the living and the dead, and a reminder that some souls just needed a helping hand to find their way home. The end. If you like the stories, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's hear the next story.